Hi, True Crime Grapevine fans. Oh, wow. We are really blowing out today. Um, I think I might be able to help that maybe by, let's see, maybe that helps a little bit. Anyway, hi, how are y'all doing? This is the True Crime Grapevine. That's Skelly. Skelly, say hi to the people. This is me. And we're going to be talking about the Daybell case this Saturday. So instead of going live every day, if you've been here before, I'm still trying to figure out a good way to have little chats and not go super long. So I thought maybe this time I could go case by case and see how that works. We'll see. So the Daybell case this week. Let me just tell you. We had some more. We had another sergeant. It started out like if you've been paying attention to how they go, they have a police officer, and then they'll have like a family member friend, another like somebody who works in the lab, family officer, that sort of so you don't get like too much technical all at once. And then also the story seems to be going along in a chronological order. They started out sort of like finding the kids, and then they went back to Charles's death, and then have been coming forward ever since that. So this week, Sergeant Daniels took the stand, and he was the chief, and I believe when they were in, oh no, he was still the ERT, the emergency response team person. They were still going over what they had found. Pryor was obsessed with the handles of the tools found in Chad's garage. That was one of his big, huge problems. So that got finished, and then we had the big thing on Monday was Melanice as Gigi from Pretty Lies and Alibis, which is one of my favorite channels. She covered with Fruit Loop, her best friend. They covered the Daybell case from the time the children were found and have done so many deep dives. If you are interested in any specific individual in Lori or Chad's family, or any specific incident, like let's say we ended the week hearing a little bit about loin fire between James and Elena, or Raphael and Lily, Chad and Lori is who it is. And if you want to know all about that, Pretty Lies and Alibis, Gigi and Fruit Loop at the time, they gave so many good deep dives into that story. In fact, they read it out loud. I remember exactly where I was walking. So that is where you go for a deep dive for this case, as well as East Idaho News with Nate Eaton. Highly recommended for the Daybell coverage. All right, so Ian Pulowski and Melanice, as Gigi calls her, they were on the stand sort of back to back. So we haven't seen Melanice before. It was not brought up. Did she? I don't believe it was brought up. I didn't hear that she had. Did she have immunity? Oh, Skelly. Uh-oh. Well, Skelly was knocked over and surprised too. Melanice showed up, and she was a little cagey on some things, but she was pretty. She told about. She didn't know anything about the kids. Nothing about the deaths. Nothing about the kids. She didn't ask. She said that Lori said that Tylee was at school at BYU and with her college friends, and that JJ was was at school, and then later maybe with Kate. Like Melanice is sticking with basically she knows nothing about nothing. She didn't mention anything about the Brandon shooting. That wasn't even really brought up. She did go into some of what the groups that were there, that she had been moving there because Lori said something was going to happen, that she was concerned. We didn't get nothing about her kids being dark, really. Not that whole thing about, there was a lot that wasn't said. The second person, so Melanice basically was there. She was willing to talk, but not she didn't get into it. Then her husband, Ian Plowski, as you remember, Ian Plowski was the one who married Melanice very quickly, immediately upon their wedding night. She told him all about Lori's beliefs and about their system, and got a little crazy. And he actually then called his ex-wife when his daughter just played hide and seek, but he thought his daughter was missing and the kids had been missing. And like, it was all like right away, he decided, I better call somebody, called his ex-wife. She Googled Lori's name. She also then she's like, these people are wackadoodle. There something's going on. You need to call the police. So he called the FBI. He was working with them, wearing a wire, and also he would record things like when Melanice would call Lori and Chad, and they played one of those calls. It was so sad. She's crying. She calls Chad dad, and Lori's like mom. And if again, Pretty Lies and Alibis has the best background ever for understanding this, but Melanice, or she's Melanie, but we call her Melanice because she's Lori's niece. But really, her mom died early in her life, and her dad was not happy about the Coxes, and sort of that's Lori's family. Didn't really let them around them a lot, but as soon as she was able to, she really gravitated towards her Aunt Lori, and she sees her like a mom. So you can see how she sort of got pulled into this, kind of like how Tyler did. Calling Chad dad. She was told that she was the daughter of Lori Chad. It's really sad. So, anyways, Ian sort of gave the background about what was going on, what they were, how he felt it was important, because he wanted to get Melanie out of their grasp because he thought it wasn't going great either. Okay, so prior with those two people, rude, condescending, prior being prior, he oh my god, he went back to the second floor about that was with the when prior was that was with the agent. They went back again to that second floor crap. What could you see? Because they talked about the window. I'm jumping around. I'm so sorry. My notes. I have so many notes, and I just didn't want to get to a whole another week. Prior was asking. Oh my gosh. Prior was nuts when he was talking to the detectives about how far was the house to the burial, um, as if an exact amount. It doesn't really get rid of Chad's guilt. It's really unclear where Pryor is going with each and every person. Um, he is always rude and condescending with the people. I can't believe I didn't write more about Melanie and Ian Pulowski. I mean, we've heard what they basically both had to say before. So the agent Daniels, though, that was it was just a little crazy because he was talking, and it was kind of depressing about where JG was found 2 inches down. He talked about how more about how the grave was set up, how the tree branches were cut, the tree roots were cut. So somebody pre-cut that. Again, trying to say, well, how big is the acreage? How far from the house? Like basically, even though the window in the upper room, the second story that does exist, could view the burial sites, somehow, why would anybody be looking out there? It was really far away. The grass was really tall, as if somebody could go and cut a grave. And we know that they were JJ. It was daylight when JJ was buried. When well, or at least it was. I shall say it was daylight when Alex's phone. At the same time, Chad was located at his house. So it is hard to imagine, as Pryor is sort of suggesting to people, that somehow Melanie Gibb killed JJ and Alex somehow got onto Chad's land. And maybe he had also pre-cut a grave that Chad didn't notice. With later on, we find out the tools match Tylee's DNA. So also Alex was using Chad's tools to dismember Tylee. I don't know how she got from like how he got her body, where he dismembered her. Supposedly this is Pryor doesn't say Chad didn't know, did he, to people, because we don't have confirmation, because Alex, the person besides Lori who isn't talking, um, Alex is gone. So we don't really know exactly what went on. All we have is the data from the phones. And Pryor would have you believe that somehow this was all taking place under Chad's nose, without Chad's knowledge. Children of his soon to be wife being buried on his land prior to his wife dying. And he doesn't know anything about it. And it's a coinky that he called about this raccoon during the day. And the agent did say, like, we looked at the pet cemetery. No, we did not find anything consistent with raccoons. I mean, it was a story. And Pryor kept asking people, yes, but didn't you look at Chad's phones and see that he and his wife had discussed, and Tammy had discussed with her son, Mark, there were raccoons, right? He's trying to make fetch happen. And if you know, and he's not doing it. Yeah, he Pryor, I don't know, maybe he's trying to bury the jury in details to try to make them forget the horrific stuff that they're really there. I mean, he asks all about who was there, who was at the staging of this uncovering. How did you do this? Oh, was Rob Wood there? Was the prosecutor? I mean, nobody can make dead bodies be in the ground for months. No, that's just Rob Wood couldn't have made it. Like, you can't frame. Nobody framed Chad, in my opinion. Just my opinion. Yeah, they discussed the pet cemetery. Oh, Melanie's did talk about the castings, and she Pryor kept asking everybody about LDS faith, and it is interesting. I looked up in the actual just regular Christian Bible, not the Mormon additional holy readings, the Book of Mormon, which I think is a lot of it is there's some stuff that's accepted in both. But anyway, in just the regular King James Bible, I forgot about this because I've been brought up Methodist. I've gone to UCC church. I've gone to a Lutheran church before, and I've gone to a Presbyterian church. And my husband's family is Catholic, and so were my best friends growing up. So in all those different Christian religions, I never heard a lot of talk about Jesus casting out demons, and that he told the disciples something like, somehow intimated or said directly that they were not strong enough in their faith to be able to cast out demons. Anyways, there's like these little sections in the Bible that, and they're in the gospel, that I've never heard a lot about, but and I couldn't find out if they said you put up your right hands, because that's what Melanie was talking about. She talked a little about the castings, and that, yes, it was that Chad was said to have the gift of telling people. Oh, that's another thing. Melanie was big on getting down for the prosecution. The state was that Chad was the one who told about light or dark. He was the one that they, meaning Lori and Chad, taught her about castings, about how they would do it, raising their right hand and getting in this group. Julie Rowe was, she had this idea of castings as well. So we learn more that basically Chad Daybell doesn't really have uh, an original idea in his body. My opinion, just my opinion, John Pryor. But he seems to always be taking from other people, like the near-death experience, as his brother-in-law also concurred in the past. Chad did talk about near-death experience and the veil being torn from him way before he met Lori. But then after meeting Julie Rowe, it got more and more like, and because this veil had been ripped and it was ripped again, that he had this second sight and he could see what had happened in the very, very past, and past lives, and in future lives, and the future in this life. And when, basically he was a prophet. So Julie Rowe's teaching was that it said, And then Lori, this was Melanie said, Lori and Chad evolved from there. That they mentioned the Church of the Firstborn, which is the first time we've heard that, which is the name of Chad and Lori's, and I'm going to call it, this is just my opinion, a cult. That, let's see, Lori and Chad told her, oh, she talked about the statistics about Alex. Hold on a second. Chad and Lori told her about, oh, Madison County wasn't safe. So after the kids had been disposed of and Melanie was still there, but she had been married to Ian, and Brandon had been shot at but was in Arizona, and they were going to Hawaii. Basically, they're like, you know what? Madison County isn't safe right now. It is dark. And she's like, but you told me to move here because this is safe, because this is where the tent cities and the 144 are going to gather. Yeah, but not now. Basically, now that we're on the lam, you need to get gone and not talk to the police. So they were very uh, adamant to her that she not talk to the police. Now, Melanie did mention when Pryor was asking herself about that the second coming, yes, that's part of her regular LDS faith, that they tried to go, the seven gatherers. Because there were seven women at these castings, that was what Pryor had been like intimating something about the seven gatherers. What was the seven gatherers? Well, there were seven women about doing this casting, and the casting was to get the demons out of people's body. They understood then that the person themselves, their soul had been cast out. So they were basically dead, but the body was kept alive by these demons. I know. Sounds crazy. Evil spirits. Sorry. Charles Vallow. Here's the other thing, though. When they do a casting, they would call Chad. That was the other big thing about Melanie's, that Chad was the one that Lori had to call to say, did it work? And Chad would go, yes, it worked. Oh, but guess what? In that, there's this like little bit of time that another evil spirit could jump into the body. Got to do a casting again until it was a very, very evil spirit, like high level dark. And the only way they could cast him out. That's what happened to Charles, because that's where we got Ned Schneider, and Garrett was one of his demon, like evil spirits. Ned, Garrett, I think there's another one in there. And then Hiplos, which was that's like a Greek, it sounds like a Greek name. Kind of like how the woman who wrote Harry Potter, she got those ideas. I mean, she put them together in a very unique way. I'm not taking that away from her, but J.K. Rowling also did take a lot of ideas, like the basilisk was a real thing that they wrote about in either Greek or Roman mythology. So Iplos is like some Greek name, and he's like, oh, but that's a very ancient spirit with its ancient name, and that's how Charles had to get gone. And Alex is listening to this too. So the seven gatherers were these women, kind of like a coven, but they're not witches, because witches wouldn't do that. They did these castings. They would call Chad to see if it worked or not, and he would tell them. And then Alex was, according to Melanie's, Chad had told him he was like this protector of his sister. And that's kind of explains why he believed that his role was to help protect Lori from Iplos. Now, let's see. We had more every day. Oh, okay. So Tuesday, that was Monday. Tuesday was Zulema. And I will tell you, everybody's mad that Zulema got immunity. They asked her about it, and she admitted, yes, she got immunity. Well, guess what? She laid it all out. Zulema told us exactly what we sort of figured out, but didn't know for sure. Oh, she told us all about how the light oh my gosh, and Pryor was so stupid. He couldn't figure out. He was like, yes, but the light and darkness, right? Like, so bigger numbers are better and lower numbers are worse. And at one point she was keeping a journal of these ideas and had been drawing what it meant. And in one, it was like the cycle. So instead of just like across from each other, like one side was good, one side like light and good. And like one was, she said, you, I think, I wasn't sure if one was you weren't born yet, but then there was two was you were born onto this earth. I mean, seriously, people, it is like exactly what Ian Pawlowski said. It's like Dungeons and Dragons meets some sort of weird, like PlayStation game. There, there's the physical part, the spiritual part, and the uh, emotional part of one's soul. That's how you get translated. There's phases of translation. I mean, she laid it all out. And she was talking about, obviously we knew that light was good and dark was bad. One of the things that the prosecution asked Zulema was, so on the list that we see here, and they have the list, what do you notice about Chad's children and Lori's children? Which, of course, I know the answer to that because they're looking at it. All of Chad's children are light, and all of Lori's family are dark, except JJ for a little bit, right? Probably until JJ was on the spectrum. He had something called, a lot of kids on the spectrum have something called echolalia, which is you echo, you repeat things. And if he repeated anything that had to do with Tylee's demise or anything about Charles, like, oh, I'm shot, or oh, he's shot. Like, if he repeated anything like that, I'm kind of afraid that's whatever. Tylee was dark, but JJ was light. Um, the other thing we said about the scales, though, besides just showing that, that they went, the most dark was like a six, the least was a two. And obviously you'd want to be most light, least dark. There was a more of a cycle, and Pryor couldn't get it. He's like, I don't get what, if you have arrows going up one side, but then they're down the other. So why is the arrow going this way? Because doesn't it only go from least to most? And I was like, sir, it is a cycle. So if you're if you're like losing lightness, you would go then to darkness. I mean, it was showing the scale, the progression in a side of the two light and darks. Sorry, this is my goal is to learn how to put up images. I don't know how to do that yet. Um, so she talked about the worlds, that the Earth is one world, and that there are five different worlds you can come be alive on. And if you were alive in these other worlds and you were exalted, because you had done something so wonderful, you were so blessed, you were so good, that you retained exaltation on this life and this probation. And I'm telling you, she said, Lori, and so Lori and Chad explained this to her. She heard this from Lori and Chad. That was another important thing too. This wasn't Lori's ideas; these were Chad's ideas that he kind of got from other places. But um, Lori would say, "I'm in a," I was like, "I'll." Exalted being. Therefore, whatever sins I commit here, they don't count. And she would say, Lori, Lori would like do something and she'd go, doesn't count for me. Doesn't count for me. Doesn't count. Because she had been exalted. So imagine this is Chad's theory that, okay, and he's telling people who's exalted. Now, Alex didn't start out exalted. Strangely enough, once they needed him to KIL somebody, he was. They made a mistake right before July. They had met the previous October and had been meeting, and well, in the loin fire papers we see what else they've been doing. And as Zulema also said that Lori had to go back. I don't remember if I think it was Zulema. Lori had to go back. Remember, she had left Charles. That's when they were first getting separated. And Charles had JJ, and Kay had said that she was watching JJ when Charles had to go to work, and he had moved closer to her in Texas. But Lori came back to Charles for a short amount of time. And Zulema said, Well, Lori said she had to get her finances in order. And that's when those of us following it figured out that's when she thought she had put herself back on as Charles's beneficiary in his business, and his business partner, somebody caught it and he switched it back without her knowing. That's why she thought she was getting his insurance, but she wasn't. So that's when she was gone for 57 days, had gone to Hawaii. She had already met Chad that previous October, if not before. And they hadn't hurt anybody yet. They were just doing these things, and they were calling Charles by these different names. And this group was meeting and having castings. And like I said, freaked out that it was kind of mentioned in the Bible. But these people then, took it a step further. Wasn't just something that happened in the Bible. No, this was something that they could do themselves because Chad was exalted himself and could tell when somebody was um, being possessed. Yes. So Zulema told it all. It was kind of crazy. He told her that he was able to read past lives. Oh, she talked about the pendulum, or Melanice might have talked about the pendulum that Chad carried. And I think it was Zulema. And he said, "Oh, do you want me to tell you what's going to happen in your future?" This pendulum thing. It is a divination, meaning to divine, to tell the future, a prophecy, if you will. And people do it like with babies. There's like, put your ring on a chain, and if it swings like back and forth, it's a boy over your belly. If it swings the other way, it's a girl, or something like that. Chad was doing things like that and getting yes or no answers. Kind of a magic type thing. That's what people said. His church was kind of like LDS mixed with fundamentalist LDS mixed with Harry Potter. Yeah, they admitted Zulema's journal. They allowed that admission and everything, all her words, all her pictures. I mean, Pryor was losing his mind because that was really bad for them. All right. Oh God, yes, she told exactly what they needed to do a casting. They needed to hold hands. Everybody was given different parts to say, and we know that like she was to control the weather. Pryor tried to get her to talk about that, like her kooky stuff, and she handled it pretty well. I mean, she's like, yeah, I was told that I could, control the weather, and so that's what I tried to do. That was my role assigned. So it didn't sound as crazy as what it sounds like in real life. Yeah. So she said the teachings of Lori and Chad evolved. In the beginning, it was some small info, and then it became more and more until they were talking about what they were talking about. She also, though, didn't know anything. Okay, so it seems like the only three people that knew specifically about the unalivings were Chad and Lori, and then the protector, the angel, Alex. And she ended up marrying Alex, and she said that he seemed normal to her. That the problem was that she felt he really 100% believed what Chad said. He really did believe that like Charles was a zombie and that's what he killed. He wasn't, because she had asked him something about, well, do you feel bad? Like, are you upset? And he's like, no, it wasn't Charles. It was a zombie. 100% bought into that. She talked about the physical relationship and how it evolved and how it was obvious, and how a lot of the people in the group, well, she was talking about herself because she can't say what other people say. It's speculation. That lots of PDA. Tammy was still alive and she was kind of concerned, but they said that they had been married before 7 times and they had been exalted together and that they had a mission. I mean, their cover story was their cover story, and they told it to everybody, that they were on the mission together, the 104,000, and that they were the leaders of this mission. And Chad was to create the Church of the Firstborn, that he was the head of it, and he was gathering those that belonged to that church. a cult, a fundamentalist offshoot of the LDS cult that he created, the Church of the Firstborn. And the most interesting thing Zulema had to say, especially about Alex, was that the day he got sick, he had gone to Mexico the day before, and that Chad gave him this big blessing, and that he was crying during the blessing. And afterwards, he did say to Zulema that he was either a man of God or he wasn't, and that something about, I hope I'm not like their fall guy. Anyways, he went to Mexico, fine, came back sick. So we don't know if he was told maybe in the blessing. Um, Part of the blessing was recorded. How did they get that recording? It seems perhaps that after both the children were gone and then Charles had been gone and Tammy, that maybe they didn't need Alex as much and they convinced him to unalive himself, is what it sounds like to me. That's just there is no proof of that. That's just my speculation. There's a lot more about, I mean, she went into the whole story, you guys. It would, um, Pretty Lies and Alibis does a recap each night. I'm recapping a week here and I'm not doing it justice, but if you want specifics, she that was Tuesday. Tuesday was Zulema. Monday was Melanice and Ian. So if you want to look up those days, you can go look up what Pretty Lies and Alibis did a recap on, and that will do you well. On the 8th, we learned more about, oh my gosh, Wednesday was hard because that was about the autopsy of Tylee. Um, the actual ME was on the stand, and Pryor tried to get the MA. Oh my gosh. Pryor, after listening to this horrible stuff about um Tylee and JJ, he asked the Emmy questions about, well, you mentioned bruises, because he was saying that JJ had bruises, and he goes, um, could you tell if they were old or new? What about heavy lungs? And then everybody's like, oh my God, he's trying to relitigate Tammy's autopsy results with a new, like using a different state witness that didn't even look at Tam. It was so, I mean, I guess uh, I don't know what Pryor's case is going to be. That's going to be interesting because he's kind of doing a lot of, they said they gave him extra leeway in his questioning of witnesses because I don't think he has a lot of expert witnesses, and he's got to do what he needs to do during, like, his cross is a little bit of a direct cross, if you will. That's why he has a little more leeway in what he's asking until he gets cuckoo for coconuts. Um, Detective Werther talked about, again, he came back and talked about, this was a different detective, talked about the cell phone towers. He was talking more about the Gilbert, Arizona things, and Charles and Lori's and Alex's and Chad's, who was talking to whom at what time. I mean, after all this, I will just tell you, it is pretty obvious that Chad was being made aware that Charles had been shot. And he had been talking a lot with Alex before that. That was right before that was when Alex had gotten his special change of status and was told that he was an exalted being. And remember, if you're an exalted being, whatever you do, you're already exalted. Remember, it doesn't count. Doesn't count for you. I mean, what a weird thing to tell people, but also then if you were going to get them to do something they wouldn't normally do because they would be worried about sin and punishment from somebody in the afterlife, and for you to go, no, it doesn't count for you though. You've already been exalted. I mean, kind of a perfect storm there. Oh, Pryor. They had they had another technician that talked about the plastic and what kind of hand and DNA they got off these things. One was the person who did the um, latent prints, which are the prints that you leave, like touch DNA. uh, the oils on your finger, actual fingerprints, palm prints. So they found Alex's palm print and Alex's pinky on JJ's plastic wrap and in the duct tape. We knew this from Lori's trial. Lori's hair. And so prior, did you find any of Chad's DNA? I'm like, this sounds a lot like Charles Manson case. If you guys know, when Charles Manson wasn't caught. It wasn't, he was trying to say, well, I didn't do it. They did it. And the prosecution was like, they did it because you told them it was a race war. They did it because, like, basically they're in your cult. And Charles Manson was always like, no, not me, man. Pryor's kind of doing that for uh, Chad. And it doesn't go well. It's dumb. Everybody knows, well, Chad, it was Chad's property. It was Chad's soon to be wife who wanted those children out of the way so that they could live their non-child life. Who else did we hear from? We heard from the person who did the DNA and this person, she was amazing. She had a great reputation. She works at the Idaho State Forensics. She had worked like in other, like FBI stuff, labs, commercial, everything with DNA. And she was talking about that there was DNA found on the tool. But they didn't test the handles. They tested the bottoms of the tool, and it was Tylee's DNA that they found on a pickaxe. Obviously, we're thinking dismemberment. And remember, she was burned and then buried in concrete. And there is no way you dismember somebody and burn them for a couple days in a row on somebody's property and they don't notice that. And Chad had also, there was one time Chad looked up the wind direction the day before the bonfires started. So do we think it doesn't have anything to do? What a coinkydink, right? Again, very crazy. At the end of the week, the big thing, there was a day off because they are doing carpeting. And then by Friday, I listened to the lawyer, Peter Tragos. He's doing great recaps, very concise. The opposite of me, really like him. And he's a lawyer, so he can say a lot about why certain things happen in the court. Again, I watched the Friday's review, Eaton's instead of his review. I watched the lawyer. Basically, I saw part of it, but then I switched to the Reed case because it had heated up to the point. That case, I'm talking about that next. It is insane. But I went back and watched it. So what I saw was Jason William, who is Tammy's sister, Samantha's husband. He actually was really good friends with Chad. Now, his whole purpose, I think, was to talk about Chad being friends with him and being willing to tell him, like, since 2000, back as 2013, he was talking about he had this near-death experience, that he could see beyond the veil, that he knew that he had to move to Rexburg. At one point, he told this guy to move to Rexburg without his wife, because his wife should move south because she wasn't part of the 44,000. Like, basically, you come with me, dude. You're special. But you're special and different, very culty, right? Um, he thought he thought Samantha was dark, but as you will see, she's very, very light because she knew that everything that was happening wasn't right. But way before Lori Vallow was in the picture, Chad had been talking about gathering the sort of LDS adjacent beliefs. But he said, Chad was a nice guy. He liked him. He had known him for, years. But he wasn't going to move to Rexburg, and he wasn't moving without his wife. But once Tammy had died, he and Samantha were very, very, the whole family was super concerned. And he worked himself with the police without any problem. Sure. You want me to tape him? I'll tape him. He called Chad, and Chad and Lori was like, hey, can I help you? What's going on? Where are you? What do you want? And Chad and Lori like, oh, you don't understand. There's this, Heather Daybell had spoken about how, uh, they were telling people that she was a problem because she was trying to get the police on them because she didn't like them. And her daughter had married somebody whose dad was a police chief. So somehow Heather Daybell was able to do this. And they were telling the same thing, like, there's this bad police guy. They're just hassling us. Everything's fine. It's really very simple. And he's like, yeah, well, Samantha looked up, like, they had first said Lori's name was Lori Ryan, and that her husband had died, and that's what brought them together because they both had spouses that died. And after finding out that her name was Lori Vallow and that her husband had been shot, Chad and Lori are like, you know what? It's very complicated. Don't worry your pretty little head about it. It's complicated, so we wanted to keep it simple. We didn't want to bring in all that drama, and it really has nothing to do. And the missing kids are so, like, the Tammy problem, they called it the Tammy situation. That was because of Heather Daybell. And the kids problem was because of Kay. Like, it's always somebody else's problem. It's no big deal. The police, it's not, they're just being hassled. Remember Lori's telling you that. Then Samantha got on the stand and she talked about how she knew something wasn't right, that she and Tammy were going to, they wanted to grow old together. She was planning, Tammy wanted her to get a job up there. She was going to move up and be like a theater teacher to Tammy's librarian. They wanted to live close together. She didn't seem set. Uh, and then how weird Chad was acting. She said, why are you not burying her in Idaho? That's where you are. That's where your family is, your kids. And he was like, well, it's really icy and snowy up here 9 months of the year. So I'd rather have her in Springfield, Utah, where we grew up. And then she said on the headstone, he didn't want his name on it, like wife of. And she goes, that's really weird because he's really big into family history, and that's very big in the LDS faith. And it's big because people do family history and they go look at graveyards. And if you don't have that on there, they don't know who you were married to. And it's kind of like disconnecting him from her forever in history. That upset her. So the fastness of the burying her, where they buried her, how they buried her, the fact that Chad and his kids came down and they were supposed to, before the viewing, have a luncheon that they set up. They skipped the luncheon. It's like everything was like, it's no big deal. Let's just get this over with, right? Because he's got to get on with his life. Um, and then he took Samantha aside and said, look, Tammy came to me in a vision at the graveyard and said she wanted me to move on with my life. And Samantha said, yeah, wives say that. They mean like in 2 years, not in 2 weeks. She was not happy when she had learned that he had been married so fast. So the very last person, I guess, to speak was a FBI officer, back, the same woman that talked about text before. We're back to texting, we're back to emails, and we're back now to the story of Raphael and Lily, or you may know them as Elena and James, or Lori and Chad. It was loin fire, right? Disgusting. So I won't make you listen to any of that. So the state is close to wrapping things up. I think they have a few more witnesses, and because we're basically at the end of the story now, right? The kids have been found. We went through all of their examinations. And now we have tied pretty much the idea that Chad had these beliefs way before Lori ever entered the picture. They were kind of like this weird perfect storm. And remember, power, sex, and money. And we've gone over the money that they had. They had $10,000 with them. They were caught in Hawaii. That's what move to Idaho. No, you're going to move. Here's like basically breaking up their marriage. Does that sound familiar? That kind of power over people. And the sex, well, the law and fire. So the state has covered their bases. Anyways, that's What happened in the Daybell case this week? Do you have any comments you would like to make about it? Put them in the comments below. Like, subscribe if you want. It's free. And that's all I have to say about that. I will be back some other time, maybe spilling a little tea next Saturday with you guys. All right. Bye.